Are you ready? Are you ready to hear some thought-provoking concepts about how we move our body? I'm Linda Gee-Hesketh, and I'm here as a mom, a wife, a grandma, and formerly trained as a kinesiologist. So the science of human movement, but also a world traveler. So I'm going to bring you concepts based in Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, different cultural thoughts on movement, and hopefully inspire you to apply some of these really simple principles that are so cool, and they leave us feeling so good. And the side bonus is that we look really good and we move in an agile way, and it's sustainable and harmonious with the rest of our lives. So stay tuned. Hey guys, I'm excited to talk to you today about our lymphatic drainage system, our lymphatic system, because it's really amazing. And it might sound like a dry topic, but trust me on this. If you've been a client of mine and you've had a stuffed up head, a head cold, a sore throat, a runny nose, we have definitely dug into a spot underneath your right collarbone and just opened up the drain on that and given you instant relief. This is something I've been so passionate about for more than 25 years, and I want to bring it to Celebrating Delicious Movement podcast because it's like the unsung hero of our body and our body transformations. So I want to bring some attention to it. Let me start off by saying we have a whole heart and lung blood circulatory system that goes through every cell of our body. It provides oxygen. Um, and it goes to our brain, it goes to our muscles, it goes to our organs, our gut, everything. And there's a pump, obviously. There's our heart. If our heart stops beating, there's loss of life. So that system has a built-in pump. The lymphatic system is uh, very similar in its roadmap around its body. Um, every cell has access to it. And what it does is it's a superhighway for our immune cells for draining out any waste products or toxins, and it transports nutrients. And it runs very close to our artery system. The thing is, there's no pump. So it's super interesting because what it depends on for its flow dynamics, its fluid dynamics, is gravity and movement. So let's say I'm looking at the palm of my hand. If I contract my fingers into a fist and squeeze as hard as I can, and I contract all those muscles, and then I open up my fingers like a starfish, like big enough so that I can put an egg between each finger. There's contraction and relaxation of those muscles, and that causes some pumping of the lymphatic fluids so that it circulates around. It's a closed system, so it will just flow and it'll kind of push through the whole thing. So the problem that we come up against is when are still for, let's say, 20 minutes or more. So if I'm sitting for a prolonged period of time, if I'm traveling, so for example, if you're traveling in an airplane or traveling in a car and you're in a seated position, you might have swollen ankles, or your legs just feel achy and heavy and full, or you might feel like you're just I have people say, oh, I just get constipated every time I travel because I'm not getting um, like I'm not getting enough movement, like I'm not getting enough um, variety in my travel position. So that would be an example. So what we do is um, we can do things like put our feet up. Like if you lay on the ground or lay on a couch and put your feet up on the backrest and just have gravity pull that down. You can do some type of massage. You can do some type of dry brushing, like a very light, feathery massage. Like I think the technique is called effleurage. So that's the whole idea behind dry brushing. Is it's just like if I was just to gently blow a feather off the palm of my hand, like just if you just put that kind of pressure on the skin, and it will stimulate the direction of flow underneath. And you can think of the lymphatic system as a whole bunch of one-way gates. So let's say you go into the subway station and there's a one-way gate. Like you can go in, but you can't come back out. And so then you're in a compartment until you go into the next one. Our lymphatic system works that way so that we don't get too much pooling in our lower body. So once it flows into one section, it can't backflow unless the one-way gate is broken, which is sometimes what happens with um, an injury, with illness, um, with aging, where the connective tissue is weakened, and so that gate doesn't snap shut with quite the same seal. And so it becomes even more important to have that lymphatic drainage assisted. So you might hear people say, oh, well, once I got to a certain age, I just had swollen ankles all the time. It might be because the integrity of their gaits um, didn't cordon off the fluid in quite the same efficiency. So there are other things that impact the fluid dynamics too, and some of that is our hormones, some of that is our organs. So for example, our thyroid hormones can change the fluid balance, which changes sodium retention, and then that affects your fluid dynamics. Cortisol, which is a stress hormone, um, the thymus organ, the spleen. This is where a lot of these immune um, cells get produced. The spleen is a big filter. And so we have nodes or little gates, or they're like, they look like little beans. Um, so you have like a string, and then you have a little bean, and you have a string and a little bean. And sometimes the beans kind of cluster. And then we call that area a gate. So you have a big drainage gate in your armpits. So it drains everything from your head, your neck. So like if you ever get a sore throat, you kind of feel like, oh, my underneath my jaw and my ears and my throat is really tender because there's so much fullness there, and you want it to drain into your underarms so that it will go along your spine into the gut, because the gut is where it gets processed, and then you urinate out the I don't want to keep saying toxins, but like the undesirable waste products. And in our legs, we have a whole cluster of beans or nodes, drainage gates for our lymphatic system right in front of our hips. So it would be kind of where the bottom seam of a bathing suit would be. So the very front of your hips, so underneath your hip bones, in the crease of where the legs meet the torso, just kind of where you would put your hands in your front pockets, that area. And if you see somebody who's really lean, like a competitive bodybuilder, you can see it just looks like a plate of spaghetti. There's a lot that's really close to the skin surface in that area. That's an area that is really important to keep clean or keep stimulated. The other thing is when we are really tight in our muscles, our connective tissue, our fascia, we can create restrictions in this lymphatic system. So there are lots of things that compromise the lymph, and we want to do as much as we can to keep it free flowing because we want to be able to have um, an immune system that works so that our immune cells can travel to the area where they need to be able to do the repair and be available, but also so that we can reduce the waste products, the toxins. We want to detoxify as much as we can. And when we don't, how it shows up is we have a weaker immune system. That's kind of obvious. But we also have some brain fog because the toxin level is too high. We have fluid retention, often in our lower body, but it can be in anything that kind of hangs down. So if you're walking, it could be in your fingertips, in your wrists, in your hands. Um, you could have recurring sore throat, tonsillitis, bronchitis, that kind of thing. Could have itchy skin and rashes. For example, um, skin is our biggest organ. And so when we use the skin organ as a detoxifying um, pathway, it shows up as a rash or blemishes or acne. And sometimes it's not sometimes, very often it's not related to the site of origin. So, for example, if I have rashes behind my knees or in the webbing of my fingers or in the crease of my elbows, or on my toes, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem at my toes. Very often it's an issue within the gut. So, gut health is absolutely going to be expressed in skin health. They're very intricately related. Another sign of lymphatic drainage being compromised would be very chronic fatigue. So, the brain fog can lead to fatigue during the day. It could lead to feeling stiff and congested. So, for example, um, people who have a lot of fullness in their legs, let's say after having a cesarean section or post-operative or after a long trip, they might not be able to bend their knees or their ankles quite as freely. Like one of the remarks that I very commonly get when we do lymphatic drainage, especially if it's turbocharged with some ingredients that open up the gates, is lightness. I feel so much lighter. Like that almost seems like the theme word that I hear over and over and over again. It's just like, I just feel lighter. That one leg feels lighter, or my gut feels lighter. I can move my rib cage side to side a little bit more. It feels easier to sit because my gut doesn't feel as congested, or my neck feels lighter. I can move, I can shoulder check, I can roll my shoulders. So it makes a huge difference in that overall congestion. And sometimes it's subtle, but sometimes it's very, very visual that we can see. Um, Sometimes it shows up as cellulite. Sometimes it shows up as difficulty sweating. Sometimes it shows up as a rash under the arms, even if you're using a natural deodorant. So there are lots of signs that show us, that signal to us that our lymphatic drainage could use some help. And um, some ways that we can help it to activate, obviously, is movement, which is why this is a topic for Celebrating Delicious Movement podcast. Uh, Movement will create that pumping system, changing the position every 20 minutes if you can. Like even if you, like if you're on an airplane, doing heel raises and toe raises, that's enough to stimulate a change. Like even if you can't get up and stretch and walk around. Um, Managing your stress, because as I said, the adrenaline, the cortisol, that can impact the fluid balance, and that affects our fluid dynamics hugely. That's why even a thin person or a young person can really have a lot of cellulite, because they can um, create a blockage and create a blockage in the flow of the lymph and create that pooling. So another way is low toxin intake, which means less processed food. And sometimes our processed food is um, it's not as apparent as we might think. So, for example, if I get little tiny cocktail carrots, I just think, oh, those are 100% carrots. But the way they're processed is that they've gone through a bleach cycle. So there are chemicals in the processing that gets into the food and it's into our bodies, but it doesn't have to be listed in the ingredients. So that's something to be aware of. So processing of foods, um, getting regular physical activity, which includes stretch, which includes twist, which includes back extension, which means leaning back, uh, so that you get out of your regular range of motion and you can access uh, muscle contraction and relaxation in planes of movement that are not typical. So if you do a lot of walking, try doing side to side motion or rotational movement. So rotation of the shoulders and rotation of the hips. And um, it will have a huge impact, because that kind of rotation through the torso really helps massage the gut. There is lymphatic massage that you can do with your hands in a fist, like knuckles, and really activate the opening of different gates. And you can turbocharge this with some epigenetic ingredients, which tell the genes to act like they did during younger times when the gates were open and the gates were strong. And you can do that also with those epigenetic ingredients and using a microcurrent to really supercharge that too. You can use dry brushing. You can use contrast baths. So if you go from hot or warm temperature into something that's cold. So whether it's warm air into cold air, or a warm bath into a cold plunge, or um, cold plunge itself, especially if you get the top of the back of the shoulders um, immersed, because that's where our body has a lot of brown fat as opposed to white fat, and that can really speed up your metabolism. So contrast baths, compression garments. I know some people wear compression socks when they travel. It can be very helpful. I wouldn't depend on that alone, but for some people, especially if they have varicose veins, or if they don't have a strong lymphatic flow or blood flow, or they have extensive travel, or if they have an injury, absolutely do recommend it. And then also elevation. So whether it's putting your hands up on top of your head so that your arms aren't hanging down, or if you put your feet up higher than your hips. So for example, if you're sitting on a couch and you put your calves on some pillows, a stack of pillows, and have your feet and your knees higher than your hips, then you can have gravity drain down. Like I know there were lots of times that I would have an event to go to in the evening and I would not feel like going, and I would just lay down on the bed and put my heels up on the headrest, or what do you call it? Not the backboard, the headboard, um, for 5 minutes. And I would just use gravity and elevation, and it would bring more oxygen into the brain, more blood flow, and I would have an attitude adjustment to go out with a happy perspective. But yes, I did that for a couple of decades. So, yes, there's that. But definitely, what I want to bring to mind is the lymphatic system is very important to know about, to pay attention to not cater to, what am I trying to say? To manage, to be intentional. And you'll notice huge transformations because when our immune cells are able to reach the areas that we want transformation, whether it's chronic pain, an injury, an area of soreness, or even just flushing out the metabolites of your latest training session, it will just make everything go more smoothly. Everything will happen faster. Your transformation will be um, in a in a way that compresses time and space. Like you'll just think, oh, I had no idea I could transform my body this quickly when we pay attention to the lymphatic system. So that's my thoughts. If you have questions, comments, things that you thoughts you'd like to share, I'm really interested to hearing about it. You can reach me on my Instagram account or through the website, which is lindagehesketh.com. Send me a message through there. If you're curious about that cellulite angle and the epigenetics and the microcurrent, I have a free 3-part workshop called Cellulite Made Smooth and Simple. Just drop me a message about that and I'll make sure that you're able to get it. Okay, I hope you have a beautiful day and I hope you keep moving. Thanks. I hope you liked some of what you heard today. If you can think of 2 people who would also be interested in these concepts, I encourage you to share these podcast episodes with them. I'll be back with you weekly, bringing you more, bringing you some very interesting guests, and always bringing you laughs and giggles and really good stories. If you want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram at Linda G. Hesketh, and I'll look forward to